And so we kick off the podcast with the industrial strategy, and we're joined by a very special guest in the chamber, Green Alliance's Head of Economy, Steve Coulter. Steve, thank you for joining us on the podcast. I know we've had a lot of technical issues.
My pleasure. It's great to be here finally.
Steve, okay, I'm just going to quote to you the Prime Minister. He says this new strategy will power Britain's future by backing the sectors where we lead, removing the barriers that hold us back, and setting out a clear path to build a stronger economy that works for working people. My emphasis there. But what do you think? Hyperbole or truth, this strategy?
Yeah, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, look, we're in a really tricky economic situation. The government has no money. The economy's not growing. People haven't had real pay rises for over a decade now. And there's a lot to do on net zero. A lot of the infrastructure for decarbonisation needs to be built, and it's really tough to know where the money's going to come from. The private sector will come up with some of it, but the government needs to sort of put its money where its mouth is and leverage it and galvanize this. So an industrial strategy is really important because it's a signal from the government about the really important growth sectors it wants to prioritize, which it thinks is going to power the economy.
One thing, Steve, that might worry some of our listeners, which was also in the strategy, was this idea that the government will merge watchdogs if necessary, and particularly they listed DEFRA. The government says it wants to review DEFRA's regulatory landscape to work out if its watchdogs are fit for purpose in driving both, and I quote, economic growth and nature recovery. What do you think?
This is really difficult. I mean, the government does its best not to sort of back itself into a corner on this. It thinks you can be good to the environment and nurture nature while also, helping the economy as well, and to an extent that you can. And I think one thing that's really important that underlines this, if you think back a couple of years to the Dasgupta review that the Treasury commissioned, that spelt out in really, really painstaking and quite alarming detail the extent of the economy's reliance on nature and how biodiversity loss and nature despoilation was undermining the economy, which was promptly buried, unfortunately, by the Treasury at the time. We did some work on this, sort of resurrecting it. We had the Green Finance Institute report about a year or so ago, actually quantifying the hit to GDP, stuff the Treasury is going to be concerned about, hit to GDP from nature loss. Talked about a sort of 8% loss of GDP by the 2030s.
That's significant.
Massively significant, huge damage to the banking industry as well. It completely undermined financial services industry, especially insurers who are insuring fossil fuel projects while also being very exposed to sort of the blowback from what those do in terms of insurance claims. So on a fundamental level, the government does get that, you need to preserve nature in order to have a successful economy. But it comes to this sort of problem, this bugbear, well, what do you do about it? How do you regulate to protect nature while also helping businesses, be businesses and make money? And often these are cross purposes. Businesses don't like regulation; it's quite onerous. DEFRA, people based in Whitehall don't necessarily know what's best either for nature or for business. So regulatory costs are a concern.
Last thing, Steve, can't talk about electricity without talking about the grid.
We've underinvested in all kinds of physical assets for decades now. The Resolution Foundation calculated that if we just got up to the G7 average over the last 15 years, we would have invested 500 billion quid, half a trillion quid more than we actually invested. If we put even a fraction of that into maintaining our grid, then we wouldn't be in this situation, and we could sort of scale up electrification a lot more easily. It's the big sort of challenge of the moment. I think planning shake-up may be pretty important as well, because it's one thing finding the investment, it's also being able to actually put in this investment and build these things. So it's those two things, I think, lack of money, lack of the inclination to invest, which partly springs from inability to plan more than 6 months in advance in this country, but also planning as well, and the ability of NIMBYs to block things they don't like. Possibly if we can sort those two things out, then we may be able to sort of electrify the grid to the extent that we need, but we certainly need to do that And yeah, we need to change the way we do things if we're going to succeed. Otherwise, this is going to hold up electrification and it's going to hold up net zero. So we've got to sort this out.
To listen to the full episode of this week's Echo Chamber podcast, head to our website or download it on all major streaming platforms now.